What if the distance growing between you and everyone around you is not a failure of connection, but a sign of divine selection? There are moments when the soul begins to outgrow the world it once depended on. Familiar faces feel unfamiliar. Conversations lose their meaning. A strange loneliness settles in the heart. Most people try to escape this season. Ibn Arabi taught that this hidden exile often appears before a deeper awakening. Allah removes the noise before revealing a greater truth. In this video, we will explore 5 signs that your growing distance from others may be evidence that Allah is guiding you toward a higher path reserved for those He is preparing for something more. The day the world lost its taste, there comes a day in the journey of certain souls when nothing in the world changes, yet everything feels different. The streets remain the same. The people remain the same. The routines continue exactly as they always have. Yet something deep within begins to withdraw its interest from what once felt important. A person may look around and wonder what happened. The activities that once brought excitement now feel strangely empty. Conversations that once held attention seem unable to reach the heart. Even achievements that were once pursued with great energy no longer carry the same sweetness. Many people become frightened when this season arrives. They assume something has gone wrong inside them. They believe they have become ungrateful, broken, or disconnected from life itself. They try to force themselves back into old patterns. They return to familiar distractions, hoping to recover a feeling that has quietly disappeared. Yet no matter how hard they try, the old taste does not return. Ibn Arabi spoke of the soul as a traveler moving through many stations. What nourishes the traveler in one stage may become insufficient in another. The child delights in things that no longer satisfy the adult. In the same way, the soul that begins moving toward deeper realities gradually loses its attachment to certain forms of worldly nourishment. This loss is often misunderstood because it does not arrive with an explanation. It arrives as a feeling. You wake up one day and realize that the things around you still offer their invitation, but your heart no longer answers with the same enthusiasm. The gatherings are still happening. The entertainment is still available. The endless pursuit of recognition continues all around you. Yet something inside has become quiet. A hidden distance begins to form between your heart and the world that once occupied it. This does not mean the world itself is evil. Ibn Arabi never taught that creation should be hated. On the contrary, he saw creation as a mirror reflecting divine realities. The problem is not the existence of the world. The problem is becoming trapped at its surface. When the soul begins awakening, it no longer seeks only the reflection. It begins longing for the source behind the reflection. Imagine someone who has spent years admiring sunlight dancing upon the water. One day they suddenly become aware of the sun itself. The beauty of the reflection remains, but their attention has shifted. What once seemed complete now feels incomplete because they have glimpsed something greater. This is often the hidden reason why the world loses its taste. Allah is not necessarily taking away your ability to enjoy life. Rather, He may be loosening your dependence upon things that were never meant to satisfy the deepest part of your being. The heart was created with a capacity larger than temporary pleasures can fill. For a time, people may attempt to fill that space with possessions, relationships, ambitions, status, or endless distractions. Yet eventually, for some souls, Allah allows them to feel the limits of these things. The experience can be confusing, because from the outside nothing appears wrong. Others may look at your life and see blessings. They may see opportunities, comforts, and achievements. Yet inwardly you sense a thirst that remains untouched. It is a thirst that worldly success cannot fully quench, because it was never created by worldly absence. It was created by divine longing. Many people spend years trying to escape this feeling. They rush toward more stimulation, more noise, and more activity. They believe that if they can only find the next achievement or the next source of excitement, the emptiness will disappear. But emptiness is not always a wound. Sometimes it is an invitation. Sometimes Allah removes the sweetness from certain things, so the soul will stop building its home in temporary places. The heart begins to discover that it was made for a deeper companionship. A companionship not dependent upon changing circumstances, passing trends, or human approval. This is why spiritual exile often begins with a strange loss of taste. Before the soul can hear a higher call, the volume of lower attachments begins to fade. Before a person can seek what is eternal, they are often shown the limitations of what is temporary. What feels like emptiness may actually be preparation. What feels like distance may actually be redirection. The day the world loses its taste is rarely the end of something. More often, it is the beginning of a new vision. A vision in which the heart slowly learns that its deepest hunger was never meant to be satisfied by the world alone. It was meant to guide the traveler toward the one who placed that hunger there from the very beginning. Allah removes the crowd before revealing the path. One of the most difficult truths for the human heart to accept is that not every separation is a loss. There are moments in life when people begin disappearing from your journey, not because you have failed them, and not because they have failed you, but because the road ahead cannot be walked by the same companions who walked beside you before. Yet when this process begins, it rarely feels noble or meaningful. It feels painful. It feels confusing. It feels like abandonment. A person may look around and notice that friendships once filled with constant conversation have grown quiet. Invitations become less frequent. The sense of belonging that once seemed natural begins to weaken. Even among familiar faces, there is a strange feeling of standing slightly apart from everyone else. The heart asks difficult questions. Why is this happening? Why does everyone seem to be moving in one direction while I feel pulled somewhere else? Why do the connections that once felt strong no longer reach me in the same way? According to Ibn Arabi, the soul does not travel through life in a straight line. It moves through changing states, and each state carries its own requirements. There are seasons in which companionship serves as nourishment. There are seasons in which learning comes through teachers, friends, and communities. But there are also seasons when Allah begins teaching the soul directly through silence, absence, and inward reflection. During these periods, the loss of certain connections is not always punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. Consider a traveler who is approaching a narrow mountain passage. The crowded road below allowed many companions to walk side by side. There was room for conversation, distraction, and comfort. But as the path becomes steeper and more demanding, the road narrows. Eventually, there is only enough space for one set of footsteps at a time. The traveler has not become more valuable than others, nor have the others become less valuable. The nature of the path itself has changed. This is often what happens during spiritual exile. Allah begins removing forms of support that once occupied the center of your attention. The soul that depended heavily upon approval starts finding less approval available. The soul that constantly sought reassurance begins encountering uncertainty. The soul that relied upon being understood by others finds itself misunderstood. These experiences can feel harsh when viewed through the eyes of the ego, yet they serve a purpose that is hidden at first. The ego wishes to build its identity from mirrors. It wants to know who it is by observing how others respond to it. It seeks confirmation through acceptance, admiration, agreement, and recognition. But Allah sometimes removes these mirrors so the soul can discover a deeper foundation. A person who always knows themselves through the opinions of others can never fully know themselves through Allah. This is why periods of isolation often arrive before major transformations of the heart. If the noise of the crowd remains too loud, the quieter guidance of the soul can go unheard. The opinions of others become like overlapping voices in a crowded marketplace. Every voice demands attention. Every voice offers a different direction. Every voice claims certainty. Eventually, the heart becomes exhausted from trying to satisfy them all. Then Allah does something unexpected. He reduces the noise, not always through dramatic events. Sometimes the separation happens gradually. A friendship fades without conflict. A social circle no longer feels familiar. Certain conversations begin feeling hollow. The person may spend months trying to restore what once existed, not realizing that the change was never accidental. The wisdom behind this process is often revealed only in hindsight. Years later, many people discover that the relationships they fought desperately to preserve belonged to an earlier version of themselves. Those connections served a purpose during one chapter of life, but they could not accompany them into the next chapter. Ibn Arabi often emphasized that Allah's wisdom cannot always be measured by immediate comfort. What benefits the soul is not necessarily what comforts the ego. The ego seeks familiarity because familiarity feels safe. The soul seeks truth, even when truth requires passing through unfamiliar territory. When Allah intends to guide someone toward a deeper understanding, He sometimes loosens the attachments that keep them anchored to old patterns. This does not mean every separation is sacred, nor does it mean every lonely season carries profound meaning. Yet there are moments when the heart recognizes that something larger is unfolding. A quiet awareness begins to emerge. You realize that your isolation is not empty. It contains instructions. It contains preparation. It contains a conversation taking place beneath the surface of ordinary life. The crowd often provides direction through imitation. Everyone walks where everyone else is walking. Everyone desires what everyone else desires. Everyone fears what everyone else fears. But divine guidance frequently arrives through a different movement. It calls the soul away from borrowed ambitions and inherited expectations. It asks difficult questions. It exposes hidden attachments. It reveals how much of life was built upon habit rather than understanding. Before such revelations can be received, space must be created within the heart. And sometimes that space appears through absence. This is why spiritual exile is not merely about being alone. It is about becoming available. Available to hear what could not be heard before. Available to see what was previously hidden beneath distraction. Available to recognize that Allah may be guiding you through the very separations you once believed were setbacks. The crowd departs, the familiar voices fade, and the heart stands in a silence it never wanted. Yet within that silence, a new path begins to emerge. Not a path chosen by public opinion, social expectation, or personal habit, but a path slowly illuminated by divine wisdom. And often, the soul only discovers that path after Allah has first removed the crowd that stood between it and the journey ahead. Sign 1. You feel like a stranger everywhere you go. One of the earliest signs that a soul is being drawn toward a deeper path is a feeling that is difficult to explain and even more difficult to share with others. It is the feeling of becoming a stranger in places that once felt familiar. Nothing outwardly appears different. You may still live in the same city. You may still speak with the same people. You may still participate in the same routines that have surrounded your life for years. Yet beneath the surface, something has shifted. The sense of belonging that once came naturally no longer arrives in the same way. Many people experience this and immediately assume something is wrong. They wonder whether they have become distant, overly sensitive, or disconnected from reality. They question themselves because everyone else seems comfortable, participating in a world that now feels strangely foreign. The things that once united them with others no longer create the same bond. The conversations continue, but something essential feels absent. The laughter remains, yet it no longer reaches the deepest part of the heart. Ibn Arabi understood that there are moments when the soul begins awakening to dimensions of reality that cannot be fully explained through ordinary language. During these moments, a person often discovers that they can no longer lose themselves in the same concerns that occupy those around them. This does not make them better than anyone else. It does not make them wiser, more spiritual, or more important. It simply means that the questions emerging within them have changed. Most people move through life focused on immediate concerns. Their attention is naturally directed toward daily responsibilities, personal ambitions, social relationships, and the countless activities that fill ordinary existence. There is nothing inherently wrong with these things. They are part of human life. Yet for certain souls, there comes a season when another kind of question begins quietly growing beneath all the others. The person starts wondering why they are here. They begin contemplating the nature of existence itself. They become curious about the hidden meanings behind events that others dismiss as ordinary. They notice patterns that previously escaped their attention. They feel drawn toward realities that cannot be touched with the hands or measured by worldly standards. As these deeper questions grow stronger, something unexpected happens. The distance between the individual and their surroundings begins to increase, not because they are physically leaving the world, but because their inner gaze is gradually turning toward a different horizon. Imagine a traveler who has spent years living in a valley. Everyone around them is occupied with the concerns of valley life. Their conversations revolve around the same landmarks, the same expectations, and the same assumptions. Then one day the traveler climbs a mountain and catches sight of a vast landscape beyond the valley walls. When they return, they are still standing among the same people, yet they can no longer see the world exactly as before. This is often how spiritual estrangement begins. The person is present, yet inwardly they are aware of something larger than the concerns that once dominated their attention. They find themselves listening to conversations while silently sensing deeper questions beneath the words being spoken. They participate in familiar activities while feeling an unspoken awareness that life contains dimensions most people rarely consider. At first, this experience can feel lonely. The individual may attempt to explain what they are sensing, only to discover that the language available to them feels inadequate. Others may misunderstand them. Some may dismiss their concerns entirely. Others may interpret their withdrawal as sadness, arrogance, or confusion. Yet the reality is often far different. The soul is not rejecting people. It is responding to a call that originates from a deeper place. The heart is beginning to recognize that it was created for more than mere repetition. It longs to understand what lies behind appearances. It seeks meaning beneath events. It desires a form of knowing that cannot be acquired through information alone. Ibn Arabi frequently described human beings as travelers moving between worlds. Most people imagine this journey begins after death, but he understood that aspects of this journey unfold even while a person remains alive. The soul gradually awakens to realities that the ordinary mind cannot fully grasp. As this awakening unfolds, the individual often experiences a sense of being suspended between two worlds. They no longer feel entirely at home within the assumptions they once accepted without question. Yet they have not fully arrived at the deeper understanding toward which they are being drawn. They stand between familiarity and discovery, between certainty and mystery, between who they once believed themselves to be and who they are slowly becoming. This in-between state is one of the most misunderstood stages of spiritual growth. The ego interprets it as isolation. The soul experiences it as a transition. The ego sees only what has been lost. The soul senses what is beginning to emerge. What feels like estrangement from the world is often the first indication that the heart is becoming acquainted with a different kind of companionship. A companionship rooted not in social belonging, but in divine awareness. The person begins discovering that there are forms of closeness that cannot be measured by physical presence, popularity, or constant interaction. For this reason, Spiritual strangers often appear ordinary from the outside. They continue fulfilling their responsibilities. They continue living among others. Yet inwardly they carry a secret awareness. They know that the world they once relied upon can no longer fully contain the questions awakening within them. And so they walk through familiar places with unfamiliar eyes. The streets remain the same. The people remain the same. The routines remain the same. But the soul has begun hearing a distant call. And once that call is heard, even faintly, the old sense of belonging can never return in quite the same way. The person becomes a stranger, not because they have lost their place in the world, but because their heart has begun searching for a home that the world alone cannot provide. Sign 2. The masks around you become impossible to ignore. There is a moment in the spiritual journey when the soul begins seeing the world differently, not because the world has changed, but because a veil within the observer has started to lift. Before this moment, a person moves through life accepting appearances at face value. Words are taken as they are spoken. Roles are accepted as they are presented. People seem to be exactly who they claim to be. The surface of things feels sufficient. Then something shifts. The heart becomes quieter, and because it becomes quieter, it begins noticing what noise once concealed. Suddenly, conversations feel different. You start hearing what is not being said as much as what is being said. You begin noticing the distance between a person's words and the condition of their heart. You observe how often people speak from fear while calling it confidence, how often they speak from insecurity while presenting certainty, and how often they seek approval while claiming independence. This realization can be unsettling because it changes the way you experience human relationships. Ibn Arabi understood that much of human life unfolds through forms and appearances. Every person wears identities. Some are necessary. A teacher must teach, a parent must parent, a leader must lead. These are roles that help organize life. But there is another kind of mask that develops when people become attached to the image they project rather than the reality they embody. The soul awakening toward deeper awareness begins sensing these hidden layers everywhere. You may find yourself sitting among people who appear happy, yet you feel an unspoken sadness beneath their smiles. You may encounter individuals who speak constantly about success, yet inwardly seem haunted by a fear of insignificance. You may meet those who project strength while carrying exhaustion they cannot admit even to themselves. This is not because you have gained magical insight into others. It is because the heart is becoming more sensitive to realities that cannot be measured by appearances alone. For many people, this stage creates confusion. The person starts wondering why ordinary interactions no longer feel simple. Social gatherings that once felt enjoyable begin feeling strangely exhausting. Not because there is hostility present, but because maintaining constant attention on appearances becomes increasingly difficult. You begin noticing how much energy people spend protecting images of themselves. One person wants to appear successful. Another wants to appear wise. Another wants to appear spiritually advanced. Another wants to appear unaffected by pain. Another wants to appear important. And beneath these efforts, the soul quietly recognizes a common longing. Most people are not trying to deceive others as much as they are trying to protect themselves from being seen in their vulnerability. Ibn Arabi often spoke about the layers that exist between human beings and their true reality. The greatest veil is not ignorance of information, it is attachment to false identity. It is the belief that the role is the self, that the image is the reality, that the costume is the person wearing it. As spiritual awareness deepens, these veils become harder to overlook. A person begins seeing how entire lives can be organized around maintaining an identity. Some people spend decades protecting an image that no longer reflects who they truly are. They become prisoners of expectations they created long ago. Every decision becomes shaped by the need to preserve a particular version of themselves. The awakening soul cannot help but notice this. Yet there is an important danger during this stage. The ego loves turning spiritual insight into judgment. The moment a person begins seeing the masks of others, the ego whispers that it is somehow superior. It encourages subtle arrogance. It invites the individual to look down upon those who remain attached to appearances. But Ibn Arabi warned repeatedly against this trap. The purpose of seeing masks is not to condemn those who wear them. The purpose is to recognize how deeply human beings struggle with separation from their true nature. When you see someone's fear hidden beneath confidence, you are not witnessing weakness. You are witnessing a soul trying to protect itself. When you see someone's need for admiration hidden beneath achievement, you are witnessing a heart searching for reassurance. When you see someone's constant performance, you are often witnessing a person who has forgotten how to rest within their own reality. The deeper your awareness becomes, the harder it is to hate people for these things. Instead, you begin feeling a strange mixture of sadness and compassion. You realize that many individuals are carrying burdens invisible to those around them. They spend years maintaining identities because they fear what would happen if those identities disappeared. They have become so accustomed to their masks that they no longer know where the mask ends and the self begins. Another realization starts emerging. The masks around you become impossible to ignore because the mask within you is also beginning to crack. This is the hidden dimension of this sign. Allah does not reveal the illusions of others merely to educate you about them. He reveals them because He intends to expose the illusions within your own heart as well. The qualities that become easiest to recognize in others are often the qualities the soul is being invited to examine within itself. You begin asking difficult questions. What image am I protecting? What role have I mistaken for my identity? What version of myself am I afraid to release? Where have I sought approval instead of truth? These questions mark the beginning of genuine transformation. The soul gradually loses interest in appearances and becomes more concerned with reality. It stops asking how things look and starts asking what they truly are. It becomes less fascinated by status and more fascinated by sincerity, less impressed by performance and more drawn toward authenticity. This shift changes everything. The world that once seemed solid begins revealing hidden layers. Relationships become more transparent. Motivations become easier to recognize. The games people play become more visible. Yet the greatest discovery is not what you learn about others. The greatest discovery is how much of your own life was built upon identities that were never meant to last. And as those identities begin falling away, the soul takes another step toward the path Allah has prepared for it. The masks become impossible to ignore because the heart is being trained to love truth more than appearance. And once that training begins, the eyes can never again see the world exactly as they did before. Sign 3. Your solitude becomes more nourishing than company. One of the strangest transformations that occurs during spiritual exile is that loneliness slowly begins changing its nature. At the beginning of the journey, solitude often feels heavy. The silence feels uncomfortable. The absence of constant companionship feels like a burden that must be endured. The person finds themselves reaching instinctively for distractions, conversations, and activities simply to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. Like most people, they have spent much of their life treating solitude as an empty space that needs to be filled. Then something unexpected begins to happen. The same solitude that once felt like deprivation starts becoming a place of nourishment. What was once experienced as absence begins revealing itself as presence. This change does not happen overnight. It emerges gradually, often so gradually that the individual hardly notices it at first. They begin spending time alone and discover that they no longer feel the urgency to escape themselves. Moments that would have previously seemed boring or uncomfortable begin carrying a strange sense of peace. The mind grows quieter, the heart feels less scattered. The constant pressure to participate in the noise of the world starts losing its hold. For many people, this shift is confusing because it appears to contradict everything they have been taught about happiness. Society often presents fulfillment as something found through constant connection, constant stimulation, and constant activity. A person is encouraged to remain occupied, entertained, and surrounded. Silence is treated as emptiness. Solitude is treated as a problem that needs solving. Yet the soul often discovers something entirely different. Ibn Arabi understood that there are dimensions of human experience that only become visible when external noise recedes. Certain realities cannot be perceived while the attention is endlessly scattered across the surface of life. The heart requires moments of stillness to recognize what has been speaking within it all along. Imagine a pond whose surface is constantly disturbed by wind. No matter how clear the water may be, the reflection remains distorted. The movement prevents the image from settling into clarity, but when the wind ceases, the water becomes calm. Suddenly, it reflects the sky with remarkable precision. The human heart operates in a similar way. When attention is continuously consumed by external concerns, the deeper layers of awareness remain difficult to perceive. The individual becomes accustomed to living among reflections without ever encountering the source of those reflections. Solitude begins creating the stillness necessary for a different kind of seeing. This is why certain souls eventually find more nourishment in solitude than in company. It is not because they have stopped loving people. It is not because they have become cold or detached. It is because they have discovered a quality of presence that many forms of company cannot provide. In ordinary social life, much energy is spent managing expectations. People adjust themselves to fit conversations. They respond to social roles. They navigate countless subtle demands placed upon them by relationships and environments. None of this is necessarily wrong. It is simply part of being human. Yet it often requires attention that could otherwise be directed inward. When a person enters genuine solitude, those demands temporarily fall away. For a brief period, they are no longer performing for anyone. They are no longer protecting an image. They are no longer measuring themselves against others. They are no longer responding to the endless flow of opinions surrounding them. What remains is a direct encounter with their own interior world. At first, this encounter can be unsettling. Many people spend years avoiding it because they discover thoughts, fears, and questions they would rather not face. But for those whom Allah is drawing toward deeper understanding, solitude gradually transforms from confrontation into companionship. The person begins discovering that they are not truly alone in the way they once imagined. A subtle awareness emerges. The silence itself begins feeling alive. Moments of reflection become meaningful. Simple observations carry unexpected depth. The heart starts sensing realities that were previously drowned out by distraction. Ibn Arabi frequently described existence as being filled with signs pointing beyond themselves. Every moment carries traces of divine wisdom. Every event contains layers of meaning. Yet these signs are often overlooked because people are moving too quickly to notice them. Solitude slows the soul down. It creates space for perception. A person sitting quietly beneath the night sky may suddenly feel overwhelmed by the mystery of existence. A simple walk may become a source of contemplation. A passage of scripture may reveal meanings that were invisible before. Ordinary experiences begin carrying extraordinary depth. This is not because the world has changed. It is because the observer has changed. The heart becomes more receptive. The soul becomes more attentive. The awareness becomes less dependent upon external stimulation. As this transformation deepens, something else begins happening. The person notices that not all companies nourish them equally. Certain conversations leave them feeling drained rather than enriched. Certain environments create inner heaviness rather than clarity. They become increasingly sensitive to the quality of what enters their consciousness. This sensitivity is not judgment, it is discernment. The soul starts recognizing that companionship is not measured merely by proximity. A person can sit among a crowd and feel profoundly isolated. Another can sit alone in a quiet room and feel deeply connected to something greater than themselves. This realization changes the meaning of loneliness entirely. The individual no longer fears being alone in the same way, because they have discovered that solitude and loneliness are not identical. Loneliness is the pain of disconnection. Solitude can become a place of encounter. One arises from absence. The other can become a doorway to presence. This is why spiritual exile often includes extended periods of aloneness. Allah is teaching the soul a form of sustenance it could not learn elsewhere. He is showing the heart that its deepest nourishment does not depend entirely upon external companionship. There is a source of strength, clarity, and intimacy available within silence itself. Eventually, the person reaches a point where they no longer seek company merely to escape themselves. They seek relationships from sincerity rather than need. They value connection without becoming dependent upon constant connection. They appreciate companionship while remaining capable of standing alone. The solitude that once felt like a desert begins revealing hidden springs. The silence that once felt empty begins carrying meaning. The isolation that once seemed like a punishment begins revealing itself as preparation. And the soul slowly understands why Allah sometimes separates His servants from the noise of the world. Not to deprive them of connection, but to introduce them to a deeper companionship that can only be discovered when everything else grows quiet. Sign 4. Your losses begin revealing hidden meanings. One of the clearest signs that a soul is being guided through a deeper spiritual transformation is a change in the way it understands loss. Most people experience loss as an ending. Something disappears, something is taken away, a door closes, a relationship breaks, an opportunity vanishes, a dream collapses. The immediate reaction is usually the same. The heart focuses on what is missing. This is natural. Human beings are attached to what they love. They build hopes around people, plans, and possibilities. When these things disappear, pain follows. There is no wisdom tradition that asks a person to pretend loss does not hurt. Even the prophets experienced grief. Even the most enlightened hearts have known sorrow. Yet there comes a stage in the journey when loss begins changing its shape. The event itself may remain painful, but the way it is understood starts becoming different. Seeing only what has disappeared, the soul begins asking another question. Why was this removed? Not as a complaint, not as an accusation, but as a sincere search for understanding. Ibn Arabi viewed existence as a continuous unfolding of divine wisdom. According to his vision, events are not isolated accidents scattered randomly across time. They belong to patterns too vast for the ordinary mind to perceive all at once. Human beings usually see only individual moments. Allah sees the entire tapestry. Because of this limitation, people often judge events prematurely. Something is lost, and they immediately call it misfortune. A door closes, and they immediately call it failure. Someone leaves, and they immediately call it abandonment. But years later, many discover that the very thing they mourned was preparing them for something they could not have imagined at the time. This realization rarely arrives during the moment of loss itself. It emerges gradually, like a hidden image becoming visible as light changes. The soul begins noticing strange connections between events that once seemed unrelated. A rejection prevented a future disaster. A delay created unexpected growth. A disappointment redirected an entire life. A separation opened space for transformation. The person starts recognizing that some of the most important developments in their life were born from circumstances they originally resisted. This recognition changes the heart. Not because suffering suddenly becomes pleasant, but because suffering is no longer viewed as meaningless. Meaninglessness is often more painful than hardship itself. A burden becomes much heavier when it appears pointless. Yet when the soul begins perceiving purpose hidden within difficulty, something remarkable happens. The pain remains real, but despair loses some of its power. The individual starts realizing that not everything can be understood immediately. Some lessons require distance before they become visible. Imagine reading a book while pressing your face directly against a single page. You can see letters, but you cannot understand the story. The narrative only becomes clear when enough distance exists to view multiple pages together. Life unfolds in a similar way. People often interpret events while standing too close to them. They judge chapters without seeing the entire story. They evaluate endings without understanding what new beginning is being prepared. Ibn Arabi frequently emphasized that reality contains layers hidden beneath appearances. What seems obvious to the senses is not always the deepest truth. The visible event is only one part of a larger movement. As spiritual awareness develops, the soul becomes more attentive to these hidden dimensions. A person may look back upon a painful betrayal and suddenly realize that it exposed dependencies they never recognized before. They may reflect upon a season of loneliness and discover that it forced them to develop an inner strength that comfort never could have produced. They may revisit a period of uncertainty and recognize that it awakened questions that eventually transformed their understanding of life. The event itself has not changed. What has changed is the ability to perceive its deeper meaning. This shift creates a profound difference between ordinary suffering and transformative suffering. Ordinary suffering asks only, "Why is this happening to me?" Transformative suffering gradually begins asking, "What is this teaching me?" The second question opens a doorway the first question often keeps closed, because the focus moves away from victimhood and toward understanding. The soul begins recognizing that loss does not merely remove things. Sometimes it reveals things. It reveals attachments, it reveals assumptions, it reveals fears, it reveals false securities. Many people discover that they never truly understood what they were relying upon until it disappeared. Only when approval vanishes do they realize how much of their identity depended upon approval. Only when certainty disappears do they realize how heavily they relied upon control. Only when companionship fades do they discover whether they know how to stand within themselves. Loss acts like a mirror. It reveals structures hidden beneath ordinary awareness. And because it reveals, it also teaches. This is why certain losses feel strangely sacred in retrospect. Not because the suffering was enjoyable, not because the pain was insignificant, but because the soul eventually recognizes what the experience uncovered. There are understandings that comfort cannot provide. There are insights that prosperity rarely teaches. There are dimensions of wisdom that become accessible only when familiar supports are removed. This does not mean a person should seek suffering. It means that when suffering arrives, it may carry more than suffering alone. Within it may be an invitation to see differently, an invitation to release something outdated, an invitation to recognize a reality that remained invisible during easier seasons. As this awareness deepens, the person becomes less obsessed with asking why every loss occurred and more attentive to what each loss revealed. A quiet trust begins forming, not a certainty that every event will immediately make sense, not a guarantee that future hardships will be easy, but a growing recognition that Allah's wisdom often operates beneath the surface of visible events. The soul begins understanding that some doors close because they belong to a path that is no longer yours. Some relationships end because they have completed their purpose. Some plans collapse because they were built upon foundations that could not carry you where you are meant to go. What once appeared as destruction slowly reveals itself as redirection. What once looked like deprivation begins revealing preparation, and what once felt like abandonment begins unveiling a hidden guidance that was present from the beginning. This is one of the unmistakable signs of spiritual exile. Your losses stop appearing as isolated tragedies. They begin speaking a language you could not hear before, a language of meanings hidden beneath events, a language of wisdom concealed within disruption, a language through which Allah gradually teaches the soul that what leaves your hands is not always leaving your life without purpose. Sometimes it is leaving because it has already completed its work. And only after it is gone do you begin to understand what it came to teach. Sign 5. An invisible call keeps pulling you beyond ordinary life. Among all the signs of spiritual exile, perhaps none is more mysterious than this one. It is difficult to describe because it does not arrive through words. It does not appear as a voice speaking from the sky. It is not an instruction written clearly before your eyes. Instead, it emerges as a quiet movement within the depths of the soul, a persistent feeling that there is something more waiting beyond the boundaries of ordinary life. This feeling may seem vague and impossible to define. You continue living as you always have. You fulfill your responsibilities. You participate in the routines that structure your days. From the outside, everything appears normal. Yet inwardly, there is a subtle restlessness that refuses to disappear. The strange thing is that this restlessness does not resemble dissatisfaction in the usual sense. It is not simply the desire for more money, greater success, or different circumstances. Even when certain goals are achieved, the feeling remains. Even when life becomes comfortable, the pull continues. It follows you into moments of accomplishment. It follows you into moments of quiet. It follows you into moments when everything seems to be going well. Something within keeps whispering that life contains dimensions not yet explored. Many people spend years trying to silence this feeling because they mistake it for discontent. They assume they need another achievement, another relationship, another distraction, or another project to make it disappear. Yet every attempt to satisfy it through ordinary means eventually leaves them standing before the same mystery. The longing remains. Ibn Arabi understood this longing as one of the deepest realities of the human condition. He taught that the soul originates from a reality greater than the visible world. Because of this origin, it carries a deeper memory than ordinary memory. Not a memory of events, but a memory of nearness. A memory of belonging to something far greater than temporary existence. This hidden memory reveals itself through longing. The soul recognizes traces of its origin, even when the mind cannot explain what it is seeking. This is why certain people feel drawn toward truths they cannot fully define. They find themselves fascinated by questions that others rarely consider. They become increasingly interested in the nature of existence, the meaning behind events, and the reality that lies beneath appearances. The world offers countless attractions, yet none of them completely satisfy the thirst that has awakened within them. The person may attempt to ignore this pull. They may bury themselves in work. They may immerse themselves in entertainment. They may fill every moment with activity. Yet the call waits patiently beneath all distractions. It does not argue, it does not force, it simply remains. The soul begins noticing how often this invisible call appears through unexpected moments. A verse touches the heart differently than before. A conversation lingers in the mind for days. A period of solitude opens questions that refuse to leave. A seemingly ordinary event suddenly feels filled with significance. The individual starts sensing that life is speaking a language they never learned to hear before. Not through dramatic miracles, not through supernatural displays, but through subtle invitations hidden within ordinary experience. Ibn Arabi often described existence as a vast network of signs. Every aspect of creation reflects something beyond itself. Every moment contains traces of a deeper reality. Yet most people remain occupied with surfaces. They observe events without asking what those events reveal. They witness signs without recognizing what they point toward. The awakening soul gradually becomes incapable of remaining satisfied with surfaces alone. A new hunger emerges, not for information, not for entertainment, but for understanding. The person begins wanting to know what lies beneath appearances. They become less interested in collecting experiences and more interested in discovering meaning. The questions occupying their heart become different from the questions that once guided their life. Asking how to gain more, they begin asking what is truly valuable. Asking how to impress others, they begin asking what is genuine. Asking how to control life, they begin asking what life is trying to teach. This shift often creates tension. Part of the person still belongs to the familiar world of routines, expectations, and obligations. Another part feels drawn toward a horizon that cannot yet be clearly seen. It is like standing on the shore while sensing the existence of an unseen continent beyond the sea. You cannot fully describe it. You cannot prove it, yet something within knows it exists. This is the invisible call. It is not always comfortable. In fact, it often disrupts the comfortable structures people have built around themselves. It challenges assumptions, it exposes attachments, it unsettles old certainties. It invites the soul into territory where familiar answers no longer provide satisfaction. Many resist this invitation because it requires leaving behind identities that once felt secure. The call does not merely ask you to learn new things, it asks you to become someone new. And transformation is rarely easy. The old self wants guarantees. The deeper journey offers trust. The old self wants certainty before taking a step. The deeper journey asks for a step before certainty arrives. This is why spiritual exile often intensifies before greater understanding emerges. Allah begins loosening the soul's attachment to ordinary forms of fulfillment so that it can recognize a higher form of longing. What appears as restlessness is often preparation. What appears as dissatisfaction is often awakening. What appears as distance from the world is often the beginning of intimacy with a deeper reality. As the years pass, the person slowly realizes that this invisible call has been guiding them all along. It was present in the disappointments that redirected their path. It was present in the loneliness that deepened their awareness. It was present in the losses that transformed their understanding. It was present in the questions that refused to disappear. Every stage of spiritual exile carried traces of the same invitation. An invitation not toward escape from life, but toward a deeper encounter with its true meaning. Eventually, the soul understands something profound. The longing was never the problem. The longing was the guide. It was Allah's way of preventing the heart from becoming fully satisfied with what was temporary. It was Allah's way of reminding the soul that it was created for more than repetition, distraction, and survival. And when this realization finally settles into the heart, the person begins seeing their entire journey differently. They no longer view the invisible call as a burden. They recognize it as a mercy. A hidden thread that has been pulling them, patiently and steadily, beyond the ordinary world and toward the reality for which they were always intended. The secret of spiritual exile. Why Allah makes you different before He makes you useful. When people experience spiritual exile, they often focus on what they have lost. They notice the friendships that faded, the sense of belonging that disappeared, the interests that no longer satisfy them, and the strange distance that now exists between themselves and the world around them. Because these changes can be painful, many assume that something has gone wrong. They believe they are moving away from life when, in reality, they may be moving toward a purpose they cannot yet see. One of the deepest secrets hidden within spiritual exile is that Allah often transforms a person before He entrusts them with a greater role in the lives of others. The transformation comes first. The usefulness comes later. Most people imagine it should happen the other way around. They want clarity before uncertainty, They want purpose before preparation. They want to understand where they are being led before taking the journey itself. Yet divine wisdom frequently unfolds according to a different order. Before a seed becomes a tree, it disappears beneath the soil. Before a river reaches the sea, it must travel through landscapes that seem to lead nowhere. Before dawn arrives, the night reaches its darkest point. The soul follows a similar pattern. There are seasons when Allah appears to remove a person from the familiar rhythms of ordinary life. The things that once defined them begin losing their power. Old identities no longer fit. Previous ambitions lose their attraction. The approval of others carries less influence than it once did. The individual often feels different without understanding why. This feeling can become one of the most challenging aspects of spiritual exile, because human beings naturally desire belonging. They want to feel understood. They want to feel connected. They want to feel that they occupy a recognizable place within the world around them. When that sense of familiarity begins dissolving, the ego immediately becomes uncomfortable. It asks questions. Why do I no longer fit where I once belonged? Why do I feel separated from what seems normal to everyone else? Why am I changing in ways I never expected? Yet these questions often arise because the soul is being prepared for something the ego cannot yet comprehend. Ibn Arabi frequently emphasized that Allah educates every soul according to its unique journey. No two paths are identical because no two hearts are identical. What one person needs to learn through companionship, another may need to learn through solitude. What one person discovers through comfort, another may discover through uncertainty. The purpose of spiritual exile is not isolation for its own sake. The purpose is refinement. Just as precious metal must pass through fire to reveal its purity, the soul sometimes passes through periods of separation to reveal qualities that remain hidden during easier seasons. Many people possess strengths they do not know they possess. Many carry wisdom they have never been forced to access. Many have depths of sincerity that remain dormant because life has never required those depths to emerge. Exile begins uncovering these hidden dimensions. The person who once relied heavily upon external validation learns to stand without constant approval. The person who once feared solitude discovers unexpected strength within silence. The person who built their identity around belonging begins discovering who they are beyond the expectations of others. None of these lessons can be learned through explanation alone. They must live. This is why Allah sometimes removes familiar supports. Not because He intends to weaken the servant, but because He intends to reveal strengths that comfort has kept concealed. The process often feels confusing, because transformation rarely announces itself while it is happening. A tree does not hear itself growing. A river does not watch itself carving stone. The soul does not always recognize its own expansion while it is unfolding. Only later, when looking back, does the person begin noticing what changed. They realize that situations which once overwhelmed them no longer hold the same power. They realize that fears which once controlled them have weakened. They realize that their understanding of life has deepened in ways they never anticipated. Most importantly, they realize they have become someone different. Not different in the sense of superiority, not different in the sense of being above others, but different in the sense that their vision has expanded. Their priorities have shifted. Their relationship with existence has matured. This difference is essential because usefulness in the spiritual sense does not emerge from information alone. Many people possess knowledge, far fewer possess understanding. Knowledge can be acquired from books, teachers, and experiences. Understanding is often born from transformation. A person becomes capable of guiding others only after confronting their own confusion. A person becomes capable of offering compassion only after understanding their own vulnerability. A person becomes capable of recognizing truth in others only after facing truth within themselves. This is why those who eventually bring light into the lives of others often spend years walking through uncertainty first. The preparation is hidden. The shaping happens quietly. The world may not notice it. Sometimes the person themselves does not notice it. Yet Allah is preparing capacities that will later become sources of benefit. Ibn Arabi saw human beings as mirrors reflecting divine qualities according to their capacity. The clearer the mirror becomes, the more accurately it reflects what was always present. Spiritual exile is often part of the cleaning process. The distractions are reduced, the attachments are exposed, the illusions are weakened, the heart becomes more transparent. As this happens, a person stops living solely for themselves. Their experiences begin carrying meaning beyond personal gain or personal comfort. Their hardships become sources of wisdom. Their questions become sources of insight. Their struggles become sources of compassion. The very wounds that once seemed pointless become places through which understanding enters. This is one of the greatest mysteries of spiritual exile. The season that feels most unproductive is often accomplishing the deepest work. The season that appears empty may be preparing the richest harvest. The season that feels like separation may actually be drawing the soul closer to the purpose for which it was created. This is why Allah sometimes makes a person different before He makes them useful. If they remained exactly as they were, they could only offer what they already possessed. But Allah intends to expand them. He intends to deepen them. He intends to teach them realities that cannot be learned through comfort alone. And so the soul passes through exile. It becomes unfamiliar with the world it once knew. It learns to walk without certain supports. It learns to listen beneath the noise. It learns to see beyond appearances. And when the season of preparation has completed its work, the person often discovers that their difference was never the problem. Their difference was the preparation. The distance was the training. The exile was the classroom. And the path they feared was separating them from life, was quietly shaping them into someone capable of serving a purpose far greater than the one they originally imagined. If these signs speak to something you have been quietly carrying, perhaps your distance from others is not a mistake to be corrected, but a stage to be understood. Not every soul is called to walk the familiar road. Some are led through seasons of solitude, so they can hear what the noise of the world once concealed. Ibn Arabi taught that what appears as exile to the ego often becomes nearness to Allah for the heart. So do not fear this distance. The path may feel lonely, but every step is shaping you for a reality greater than the one you have left behind. Perhaps you were never being abandoned. Perhaps you were being guided.